So earlier you talked about how one of the roles of the judiciary is to provide a safe democratic space for people to raise their grievances to be heard. You also described judiciary as a stabilizing influence in the evolution of our society. So my question to you would be that when judges decide cases, and the cases may not essentially involve questions of law, they are more to do with forward-looking outlooks, more to do with changes that the society should itself bring in. Do they dwell upon whether the society is ready for those changes or not when they decide cases?
Well, let me. Obviously, you have something which we have recently decided in mind, but let me answer your question by just sharing this. We are not an elected arm of the state, and for a reason. The elected arm of the state is equally important. I'm not belittling the importance of the elected arms of the state, the legislature and the executive, because they ultimately have accountability to the people. The legislature consists of elected representatives of the people. The executive in a parliamentary form of government is answerable to parliament. So they are vital institutions of a democracy. And I respect that as a judge, as Chief Justice of India. But equally, it's important to understand what role judges have to play. The fact that we are not elected is not something which is a deficiency in our process, but which is a strength of our process. And why do I say that? The reason for that is that there are certain abiding or eternal values that a society must stand for. And particularly a society like ours, which is governed by a social transformative instrument like the Constitution. And because there are certain abiding or eternal values, the courts are entrusted with the duty to protect those values. Now, very often, we do realize that we are ahead of the times. For instance, in, say, the area of environmental protection, perhaps we are ahead of the times. In my dissent in the same-sex marriage equality matter, where I came to the conclusion that you must recognize the right to form unions, which was not agreed to by 3 of my colleagues. Well, that's part of the judicial process, and I respect that process. I can't criticize it merely because my view was not accepted by the majority, because I respect their right to take a view which they think that the Constitution espouses. But to really then sum up my answer to your question, judges don't look at how society will respond when they decide cases. That's exactly the distinction between the elected arms of government and the judiciary. The elected arm of government is intended to be responsive to the people. Obviously, the judges go not by popular morality, as I call it, but by constitutional morality. And what do you mean by constitutional morality? Constitutional morality consists of those values of the Constitution which the courts are intended to espouse. And which are those values of the Constitution? Broad values such as fraternity, human dignity, personal liberty, equality. These are fundamental values of the Constitution which judges are intended to espouse. And in that sense, I feel that we exercise a stabilizing influence on the legal system. Because contrary to what has happened in many other countries across the world, where the power of violence or the power of the gun has got the better of a stable and peaceful society, I believe the existence of courts as institutions wedded to the rule of law, and not just judges, lawyers as well, civil society which comes to our court, this is a platform for engagement, where people feel that they will at least have a space to exchange views, ideas, into producing a new synthesis of change within society.
So you talked about the distinction between an elected arm of the government and the judiciary. The judiciary, as you said, that it also abides by certain cardinal principles, despite being the final word in the interpretation of the Constitution and laws.